formally greet you and say thank you very much for coming this evening. This talk was particularly for specified people, right? I'm glad that most of you that we targeted are here. I chose this topic for a couple of reasons. I think we can relate, right? I think this is a topic that most of us can relate with, and perhaps there's a couple of learnings that we can take out of it, right? And that's why we chose financial pitfalls. But let me say to you, we live in a changing world, right? There's a Greek philosopher by the name of Hercules who lived around the 456 BCE, right? And in one of his most famous books, which is called The Fragrance, he coined one of the most used phrases even today when he said the only constant in life is change. One would have thought that that phrase would have been relevant back then, but if you come to think about it, it's even more relevant in the times that we live in, right? So if you don't believe me, we live in a political world where change happens overnight. In fact, you go to sleep with one minister and you wake up the following day with another minister, right? You go to sleep with one president and you wake up the following day with what? Another president. In fact, they call it a recall or a reshuffle, right? So that's the political world that we live in. So when he wrote this around 456 BCE, I just think in my mind he never had an idea of the type of a world that we are going to live in that changes overnight. So in the political landscape, if you look at it, things change almost every day. Now if you look at the commercial world or the commercial landscape that we live in, also the phrase can also be used there, right? So what do I mean by that? If you think about it, 10, 20 odd years ago, if you took a 10 around Soweto, what would you see?
Peoples.
You'd probably see internet cafes, right?
Yes.
Do you still remember that?
Yeah.
10, 20 years ago, there were internet cafes in almost every corner in Soweto. What other thing? If you think about 10 years ago, there were public pay phones in every corner in South Africa, right? And even around Soweto. That shows that if you think about it 10 years later, that was the most dominant thing. But today, we live in a world of what? Of smartphones, right? We live in a world of apps. Now people don't have to go to an internet cafe for them to be able to do what? To do what they need to do. They sit with their smartphones and they do their job, right? So nowadays you can also apply for a job online, sitting at home, without necessarily going to a what? To an internet cafe. So that shows that we live in a world where even commercially things are what? Things are changing. So that means two things for us. One, if your organization does not move with change, it becomes irrelevant and it loses customers and money.
Absolutely.
Right? On the second level, if you as an individual do not keep up with technology and change, you become irrelevant and redundant as a person. So we live in a world where constantly change is what we are used to. So politically, if you look at it, things change every day. If you look at it from a commercial point of view as well, things change on what? On a daily basis. Perhaps one of the other things that is very important is the financial system itself. On a daily basis, if you're not aware, it changes every day. Some 6,000 years ago, we had what we call a bartering system. Right? In a bartering system, it is about a coincidence of wants, right? So I bring in something that coincidentally you would want.
Yeah.
If there is that type of a meeting, we would exchange, right? So let me make an example. If you're looking for grains, and I happen to have wheat, right? So if we somewhere at some point meet, we can then exchange. There's no money that is involved there. That's the type of system that was used some 6,000 years ago. So they used to use that system. Now, if you thought that system went out completely, it didn't. Think about it, in the around 1930s, during the Great Depression, there was no money. So what happened? People went back to what? To bartering. Now, if you think about 2007 and the global financial crisis, it introduced to us a different type of system. Like the point that we are trying to make, change is the only constant in life. Now we're talking about Bitcoins. Now we're talking about Ethereum. Those type of cryptocurrencies is what we see on a daily basis. So that means that if you're not keeping up with what? With change, you become left behind. So change happens both on the political system on the commercial system, also on the financial what? On the financial system as well. Someone once wrote this beautiful word and he said, the greatest two ills that were ever invented by human beings is the political system as well as the financial system. Now I want to tell you a story about my friend called Gary. Now Gary, I used to work with Gary 2 years ago when I was at a mining company. Now Gary comes from a family of a mother and a father. So the father is an entrepreneur with a couple of businesses, and the mother is a doctor, right? So Gary and his mother and father live currently in Midrand, right, in the suburb of Midrand. Now he went to a private school, right? It's a dream for some of us, but he went to a private school, right? And during his schooling days, his mother and father made sure that they keep money aside for him so that when he goes to university, they would have money, right? Now, when I talked to Gary during the time when I used to work with him, so I said to him, so tell me a little bit more about where you come from. So he said, I went to a private school. I had friends that also came from well-off families, right? So most of his friends and the cycle that he kept was people that came from where he comes from. Now, he graduated top of his class when he got to grade 12. Obviously, think about it. Went to a private school, they probably have resources, right? They have the right resources to teach and facilitate learning. So he went to a private school and he graduated top of his class. Now, his father, because he was an entrepreneur and had money, he presented him with an Audi when he matriculated top of his class. It's a dream for some of us. We never got there. So he got an Audi from his father. And then that obviously would motivate him, right? To go and work harder. So when he went to university again, he graduated top of his class. Now here's the thing that is interesting about Gary. When he graduated, he had options, right? He could either go and look for a job, right? Or he could join his father's company. So he had options. So if you think about the landscape that we have as South Africans, this is true for only a few of us. Most of us don't have those privileges, right? Most of us have to work very hard for us to be able to get to that point. We don't have options, right, when you finish school. In fact, finishing school is in itself a challenge. So that's game. So when I met him, I said to him, this is quite an interesting story for me because not a lot of us can relate to them. Only a few of us can relate to them. Now, I want to introduce to you my other friend called Sbusiso. Again, I worked with Sbusiso as well. Now, Sbusiso comes from Soweto, right? And he was the third son of 4. So his mother had 4 children and he was the third one. Now, he struggled during his schooling days with a couple of things, including maths and science, like some of us. He struggled with maths and science when he was at school. He went to a public school, right? Which is different from where Gary went to. Public school, no resources whatsoever, right? So he struggled, and we can understand why. And when he graduated from his matric, when he did his matric and graduated from his matric, when I asked him and I talked to him, he said he took a gap year. For 2 reasons. One, he did not have money to go to university, right? But the second reason why he didn't immediately go to university and took a gap year was because he didn't know what he wanted to do. How many of us can relate to that? I know I can. I took a gap year before I went to university, so that I can understand who I am, where I want to go, and what I want to study. So that's the same with Susi. So he did not have options as opposed to Gary, my friend. So after graduating, he got a job, right? Fortunately, this is where I was working. So he got a job there and he did an internship for a year, right? After doing that internship for a year, he was permanently employed for 2 years. Right, permanently employed for 2 years. Now, when I spoke with Gary and I sat with him and I asked him about his finances, here's what Gary did. After getting the permanent job, the first thing that he did, he went and opened a bank account. Right? After opening a bank account, he went and opened a clothing account. He's permanent, so he can afford these things. After opening a bank account, 6 months later, he went and was approved for a vehicle finance. Right? So now Sbusiso is moving in a different direction, right? When I also talked to him, what he then did was he went out and looked for a building finance of sorts from one of these building companies. And I asked him, why did you go and look for that particular finance? He said it was for him to be able to renovate his mother's house. Which made sense, right? So over the year, he accumulated a lot of debt, right? He was now permanent, accumulated a lot of what? A lot of debt, because now he had the ability to. He was permanent and he had a job. So when I sat with Gary and when he asked me to assist him with his finances, so I looked at his bank account. And these are some of the things that you get when you look at his bank account. At 12 o'clock on the 25th of every month, 20,000 rand comes into his bank account. Right? 6 minutes later, there's a debit order for 4,000 rand. Right? So that's vehicle finance that he got there. A few minutes later, there's another debit order because he moved into an apartment. Isn't that what we do? You get a job and then you start doing what? Accumulating debt, right? You get into home finance, you get into vehicle finance, you get into all these type of finances. 10 minutes later, imagine at 12 o'clock, 20,000 rands came in, but at 10 minutes past 12 o'clock midnight, he's already sitting at 10,000 rands. 2 debit orders out by now. At 3 o'clock in the morning, he's probably still sleeping and almost about to wake up. There's another debit order for 299 rand. That, when I asked him, was for his cell phone on contract. 299 rand. At 20 past 7, 350 rands came out of his bank account. This was now for him to pay the loan that he took to renovate his mother's house. Okay. 9:45, he took out 2,000 rands from Carlton Mall. So I asked him, what was that 2,000 rands for? He said, well, I've got other errands to pay, right? What he meant by other errands is there's a loan shark sitting somewhere that's accepting that money to be paid. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon, 800 rands came from his bank account and he was paying his clothing account. 20 past 5, a debit order of 2,000 rands came out because he had a credit card. At 6 o'clock in the evening, there was a debit order of 1.5 that came out from there, and it was a food account. So he bought his food on credit. 7 o'clock in the afternoon, another debit order of 1,000 rands came out. He was still paying his student loan. So you can already see in less than 24 hours, he's sitting at 2,500 rands from 20,000 rands that came in at 12 o'clock. He made a purchase at a restaurant of 500 rand. I suppose we all need to drink, right? We all need to buy something, we all need to buy food, we all need to spoil ourselves at some point. So 500 rand came out. And the last one, when I looked at his bank account, he was left with 20 cents because he withdrew 2,000 rands from his bank account. Now think about it. This was at midnight, he was probably sleeping. All these debit orders, he was still probably sleeping, right? By the time he hit 12 o'clock, 8 o'clock the following day, he was already sitting at 20 cents in his bank account. I want to assume that a lot of us can relate to that. In fact, there's a statistic that was released by the National Credit Regulator that most of South Africans, a large number of South Africans, after 5 days, they don't have money in their bank accounts. After 5 days. So this then tells me that, in fact, this is a financial split. This is a mess. You cannot, in less than 24 hours, sit at 20 cents from 20,000 rands because of careless financial decisions that we make. Now here's a reality check. There's about 21 million credit-active South Africans, credit-active consumers in South Africa. 21 million. 10.5 of them have impaired credit records. Now what do you mean by impaired credit records? We mean that either they are defaulting or they are blacklisted. 21 million credit-active consumers in South Africa, half of them cannot pay their debts. Half of them are blacklisted. Half of them have deferred. Now this guy called Will Rogers, he coined one of the most important phrases when he said, too many people spend money they haven't earned to buy things they don't want to impress the people they don't want. Now what did Will Rogers mean? When he said too many people spend money they haven't earned. When you go out and seek out a loan from a loan shark so that you are able to carry yourself for the balance of the month, you've already put yourself in the red for the coming month. So by the time your salary clocks in, you already owe a mashonisa sum. So what are some of the financial pitfalls? And I'm not saying this is the most exhaustive list. You can probably think of others, but I think this is the most important ones that I'm going to share with you in the next few slides. Is it true?
Yeah.
For some of us.
Is it true? For some of us. But I think for a greater part of us, this is true. Right? We are all for instant gratification. We are not for deferred gratification. Right? So here's the thing. If Sbusiso did not suffer from this, he probably would have been at a better financial position. Right? He could have done away with the food on credit. You could have done away with the loan. You could have probably done away with the cell phone contract. Why would you buy a cell phone on contract, right? So you could have done away with a couple of other things. But because he had instant gratification, he found himself in a very worse financial situation. So the skill is learning how to defer your gratification, right? It's not a problem to have a gratification, but the problem is what is the timing with the gratification. So that's the first financial pitfall that we find ourselves in. It is instant gratification. Here's the second one, and I don't think a lot of us think about it. Cecil is laughing, so this is true, right? Do you think about this? So last year I had this young lady that came to consult with me, and because she's a friend, I opened myself to it. So she said to me, see, I have a lot of problems. I currently work as an administrator, so I think I don't earn enough to be able to manage my finances. So I said to her, okay, let's take a bit of a talk, right? Let's look at your finances. What is it that you have and what is it that you're spending with? As part of my observation, I went with her when she went for grocery shopping, right? So I'm just there as an observer, right? She's consulting with me, so I'm there as an observer. So I said to her, okay, let's go, let's see how you do your shopping. So when we went with her, she bought a lot of stuff, right? I can't comment because I'm observing at that point, right? So she bought a lot of stuff. She's a lady, I can understand, so she went for lady stuff. But over and above that, she bought clothes, right? She also bought the same kind in different colors, right? So it's the same shoe, but the other one is blue, the other one is red. Same stuff, right? So I was there observing and we went through and she bought and she bought and she bought and she bought and she bought. And then after buying, then we went and we sat down and said, okay, so let's look at what you bought, right? So running an analysis of the things that you bought. Like I'm saying, one of the problems was that one, she bought two of the same kinds, just that it's different colors, right? So I said to her when I came up with an analysis, I said the first thing that you did wrong was you did not have a plan when you're going to shop. You didn't have a plan, so that's the first wrong thing that you did. You went into the mall without a plan. So you didn't know what you were going to buy. You didn't know how much it could potentially cost, right? We live in a world of smartphones. You can check what the prices are in the markets that we normally go to. So one, she didn't have a plan. So she went in there without a plan. So that exposed her to a lot of things, buying things that she didn't need, right? Two, she had a rough idea of what she was going to do. It's a rough idea. No plan whatsoever. She didn't know what exactly she was going to do. So she went in there with a rough idea. So I came up and I said to her, you see, one of the problems that you have, and which is a problem for you, is that you don't have a plan and you're running your finances from there. top of your head. So that's a problem that most people have with their finances. The third one